Art and sex. Those are the two magic words that form the Qinglou, sometimes referred to as a green mansion in English. A Qinglou is the most sophisticated form of a luxury brothel in ancient China. You may have seen this in Chinese historical dramas, talented courtesans in their fancy apartments composing poetry with powerful officials and capturing the hearts of tragic heroes. It was a world filled with romance and seduction. Interestingly, the original idea of a Qinglou was actually not a brothel, at least not in the traditional sense. Instead, the Qinglou system was built on a beautiful lie that the highest level of society all agree to believe. 卖艺不卖身, which means to sell art, not the body. While this principle wasn't always the reality, it was the key to the creation of the Qinglou. A brothel that sells art? What is the point of that? During the chaos following the collapse of the Han Dynasty, many educated scholars faced political persecution. To survive, they retreated from politics entirely and cultivated a new lifestyle of artistic escapism. This created a demand for a new kind of female companionship. Women with artistic and intellectual talents. Women who could appreciate art and poetry. To meet this demand for artistic companionship, the women of the Qinglou were trained in the four arts of the Chinese scholar, known as Qin Qi Shu Hua. Qin is the art of music, including the ability to perform moving songs. Qi represents strategic thinking, demonstrated through mastery of the complex board game Weiqi. Shu refers to calligraphy and the skill of poetry. And finally, Hua is the talent for painting and the visual arts. In addition to mastery of these scholarly skills, a truly great courtesan was also expected to be witty and engaging in conversations. By the Ming Dynasty, all of that had changed, and a completely new kind of Qinglou emerged. Art, not body? Why not both? Why not more? The Ming Dynasty Qinglou not only blended art and sex together, it celebrated it. It created a new kind of ancient Chinese celebrity. Hey everyone, I'm Amy. In today's video, let's talk about the fascinating world of the Ming Dynasty Qinglou. The original concept of a Qinglou was a place where scholars and intellectuals could enjoy the arts with female companionship. It was a way for them to show that they were above the primal urges of a man. Unfortunately, the artistic ideals of the Qinglou clashed with the powerful forces of commerce in the Song Dynasty. With the explosion of city life and new urban culture, the Qinglou gradually degenerated from a scholarly pastime into a commercial enterprise. The model of to sell art, not the body, was still the public brand. But in reality, it became more like to sell art and the body. A courtesan's value was now measured by both her artistic skills and her physical beauty. While still hidden behind an appreciation of the arts, the business of sex became a central part of the Qinglou experience, setting the stage for what was to come. The Ming Dynasty saw even more economic growth, with a massive influx of silver from global trade, creating a new class of wealthy merchants with money to spend. At the same time, a philosophical shift toward individualism encouraged seeking of personal pleasure, a direct contrast to traditionally conservative Confucian values. This created the golden age of Qinglou, which saw a rise of huge entertainment districts, such as the famous pleasure district of the Qinhuai River in Nanjing. This environment further blended art with sex and raised the Qinglou courtesans to a pedestal of public celebration. By selling talent, sex, and exclusive access, the Qinglou built fame around their courtesans, creating a new form of celebrity. Their fame spread everywhere, and wealthy patrons traveled from all over the empire for a moment of their time, a signed poem, or a private performance. These celebrity courtesans built a devoted fan base that would compose literature in their honor, circulate the courtesans' writings, and even gather for public appearances. This was truly the first version of a celebrity and their fans. In this world, some of these celebrity courtesans were so famous that they became legends, such as the legendary 8 beauties of the Qinhuai River. This brings us to a fascinating question. How can courtesans become celebrities? Did they build an entire fan base out of wealthy bachelors? Not at all. This Qinglou experience offered a clever workaround to the rigid moral rules of the time. For the scholar officials, artists, and wealthy merchants, the Qinglou was a place to find romance and emotional connection their formal, arranged marriages often lacked. And this was especially true in the Ming Dynasty, where new philosophies celebrated the pursuit of personal happiness. But if a man was finding this deep emotional connection with a courtesan, what did his wife think? Wasn't the wife furious? Interestingly, in the context of Ming Dynasty society, not really. To understand this, we have to remember what marriage was. As we discussed in our video on Song Dynasty weddings, marriage was a contract of duty, designed to continue the family line and manage property. There was no expectation of romance or passionate friendship. The Qinglou was an accepted outlet for the passion and intellectual companionship that the formal family structure usually did not provide. Because a courtesan could almost never threaten a wife's legal position or her children's legitimacy, she was not seen as a true rival. Unlike adultery with another man's wife, visiting the Qinglou was not considered serious misconduct. For many, it was viewed as a socially acceptable form of entertainment, similarly to going to the theater or a bar today. So, if the Qinglou was this beautiful world of art and culture, does that mean it was a desirable career path? Did talented young women from across the empire dream of becoming the next celebrity courtesan? Unfortunately, life in the Qinglou was almost never a choice. The path into the Qinglou were rooted in the harsh social conditions of the time. While the Ming Dynasty saw incredible economic growth, the harsh reality was that it also saw a vast and unforgiving wealth gap. This situation is perfectly captured by a timeless saying from the famous Chinese scholar Lao Tzu, which states, "The way of man is to take from the needy to serve the rich." Or as we say today, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. While this was certainly an ancient problem, it became even more extreme in the Ming Dynasty, as peasants faced new pressures that could push them into poverty overnight. Imagine a young girl born into a poor family during a famine. With no way to feed their children, a starving family's last resort was often to sell a daughter to a Qinglou. In other common cases, girls were kidnapped by human traffickers and sold into the system. There were also instances of women entering voluntarily, but this was almost never a free choice. These women often had no other path to survival and made this decision out of desperation. Once inside the Qinglou, the girl was managed by a baomu, who could be seen as a madam that ran the operations. The girls of the Qinglou were financial assets, and the baomu was a kind of ruthless talent agent. They were relentlessly trained in music, painting, and poetry, focusing on specialization. A girl wasn't expected to master all four arts, but she was expected to have mastery in one or two skills to stand out to wealthy patrons. Failure to learn was often met with brutal punishment. It reminded me of the high-pressure trainee programs that are used today to create modern Asian pop stars. For women trapped in this system, what dreams do they still have? For nearly all of them, it was the dream of freedom. One path to freedom was known as shushen, the act of having her contract bought out. This was a purely financial transaction where a patron paid the baomu her contract fee. This wasn't a small sum. The price could be hundreds or even thousands of taels of silver, which was enough to buy a large estate, and a fortune that even a wealthy merchant could struggle to afford. In very rare cases, a top-tier courtesan who had amassed a personal fortune could even negotiate and pay for her own freedom. This path offered freedom, but also an uncertain future, leaving the woman to survive on her own. Another way out was through congliang, or to follow goodness. Similar to shushen, this path still required her freedom to be bought out, but with an important difference. The patron would also welcome her into his own family, usually as a concubine. This gave not just freedom, but also stability and protection. Unfortunately, the grim reality was that there was no freedom for most of these courtesans. A fortunate few who were clever and vicious enough might be able to become a 保姆 themselves. Some others might be kept on as servants or trainers for the younger girls. But the most likely ending for these women, as their youth and beauty faded, was to be sold to lower-tier brothels, where any pretense of art was gone and the work was brutal. And for the least fortunate, they were simply turned out onto the streets, left to face poverty, sickness, and old age, with nothing. Beyond these fates, there was another constant physical risk that defined their lives: the management of pregnancy. In an age without reliable birth control, the 保姆 would often provide herbal concoctions meant to prevent childbirth. Many of these were ineffective or outright poisonous, containing toxic substances like lead or mercury. Unwanted pregnancies were still a common occurrence and often ended in dangerous and life-threatening abortions, as a child would often interfere with a woman's ability to serve patrons. But what if the child was born? Their fate was tragic, as the child was legally considered property of the Qinglou establishment. A daughter was seen as a future financial asset, raised to become the next generation of courtesans. A son might simply be kept on as a servant. If the father was a powerful patron that lacked a legitimate heir, he might choose to formally acknowledge a son, bringing the boy into his own household to carry on the family name. But even he had no legal rights to the child. He would have to negotiate with the Qinglou and pay to buy the boy's freedom. While far less common, a wealthy patron might occasionally do the same for a female child. It was a rare chance at a better life, a stark reminder of how little control these women had over their bodies, their futures, and the lives of their own children. The morning after a night of parties in the Ming Dynasty Qinglou was not a time for rest for everyone. It was when the real work began for the establishment itself. The warmth and laughter of the evening before would be replaced by a disciplined silence, transforming the lively building into something more like an artist's workshop. In one courtyard, young trainees sat under the stern gaze of a teacher, often a retired courtesan herself, repeating a melody until every note was perfect. In another room, the delicate smell of ink drifted where other girls endlessly practiced their calligraphy, each brushstroke scrutinized, corrected, and repeated. Meanwhile, in the more luxurious quarter, an established courtesan's afternoon was spent getting ready. This process could take hours, applying makeup, styling her hair with expensive pins, and most importantly, choosing her robes for the evening. This wasn't just about looking beautiful, it was about setting trends. The top courtesans were the fashion leaders of their day. A new style of sleeve or a new color she wore tonight could spark imitation across the city tomorrow. As evening came, the Qinglou would change completely. Lanterns were lit, the scent of incense filled the air, and the sound of music and laughter would drift from its windows. In the main performance halls, courtesans were skillfully playing music or entertain groups of patrons with witty conversation. For most patrons, this was the full experience of their visit. In an exclusive chamber, a popular courtesan would gracefully host an intimate banquet, not as a servant, but as the captivating center of attention. Elsewhere, another courtesan might focus solely on her music, skillfully playing for a group of wealthy merchants, while the young trainees moved silently through the rooms, pouring wine and absorbing every detail of the courtesan's art. This general entertainment served as the elaborate prelude to the deeper engagement. For patrons willing to pay, these interactions would often culminate in private meetings that included sexual intimacy. The exception was if the courtesan was on her menstrual period, during which she would only offer non-sexual companionship, music, and conversation. But for the most popular courtesans, the night might extend beyond the public halls. After the public performances, she might retire with a favorite patron who had paid for an overnight stay. It was only when that last guest eventually departed at dawn that the profound quiet and solitude would truly set in for her. Alone in her chamber, the courtesan would gaze at her reflection, slowly removing each ornate hairpin. The makeup was wiped away, the vibrant silk replaced by a simple gown. The glamorous mask slipped away, leaving only the quiet woman beneath. In that private moment, the question lingered. Was she the admired artist who captivated the empire's most influential men? Or was she merely the most beautifully packaged commodity in this house of carefully constructed illusions? For these women, the line separating a celebrated star from a confined prisoner was often impossible to see. A courtesan's life was one of constant performance. But what was the experience actually like for the men who visited? Imagine a wealthy scholar arriving at famous Qinglou on the Qinhuai River. He would be greeted and led into a lavish main hall, filled with the sound of music and the scent of fine incense. Here, he could drink with friends while enjoying musical performances. Once settled, how would he choose a courtesan? Sometimes, if he knew a famous name, he would request her directly. But even then, gaining her attention would depend on her availability and his status. More often, especially for new or undecided patrons, the baomu would serve as a guide. Just like in the dramas, she might present a selection of the establishment courtesans who would showcase their musical talents or engage in witty conversation. The patron could then select the one he preferred. The baomu's goal was always to match the patron's wealth and prestige with the appropriate tier of courtesan, ensuring maximum profit while maintaining the Qinglou's reputation. A Qinglou was a business with a full menu of service. Unlike a common brothel, you couldn't just walk in for a quick sexual encounter. The entire experience was designed to be an elaborate performance, a ladder of escalating engagement. In order to not get censored, I won't go into all the details, but it's important to know that there were clear tiers of what a patron could pay for. A new or casual visitor might only afford a da cha wei, which was a tea session, where he could be seen with a courtesan and exchange a few pleasantries. These tea sessions could cost a few tenths of the tael of silver, roughly the cost of few meals. A more established patron could pay a much larger sum to host a private banquet, enjoying exclusive company and conversation for the entire evening. This could cost between 20 to 50 taels of silver, a sum equal to several months' salary for a mid-level official. These private banquets usually included sexual intimacy, marking a higher level of patronage. From there, the prices climbed steeply. An overnight stay could cost hundreds of taels of silver, which would be a mid-level official's salary for an entire year. To put all of this in perspective, a commoner might earn less than 1 tael of silver in a month. But sometimes, the goal is to meet the most popular and beautiful courtesan of the establishment, also known as a huakui. On a night like this, the Qinglou might hold a special event, like a poetry competition, to determine who is worthy of her time. A theme is announced, and the patrons, all educated and competitive men, put their brushes to paper, competing to compose the most brilliant verse. This was the audition. A patron had to prove his worth not just with his wallet, but with his intellect. If our scholar's poem is chosen, he is led away from the lively main hall and will be guided to the exclusive chambers of the huakui for a private audience. It was a clear ladder of consumption, designed to extract the maximum amount of wealth from its elite patrons. Sadly, almost all of these immense payments went directly to the Qinglou establishment and the baomu. The courtesan herself typically received only a small personal allowance or gifts. She was constantly indebted for her upbringing, training, and lavish lifestyle expenses. However, for the more successful courtesans, there was a rare chance to save personal wealth. Devoted patrons, eager to win favor, would often give lavish personal gifts. These could be large sums of silver, precious jewels, or valuable silks, given directly to the courtesan. Earning and saving these gifts was often the only way a courtesan could hope to buy her own freedom. The fame of Ming Dynasty's celebrity courtesan was built and measured by a system that looks surprisingly modern. At the heart of this was the publicly circulated courtesan ranking list, or 评花榜. While many such lists were created over time, each one aimed to identify the most popular courtesan. This practice truly reached its peak popularity in the Ming Dynasty and became like the top celebrity lists that we see today. These rankings were often decided as special events that became incredible cultural spectacles. On the day of a ranking, thousands of wealthy patrons and scholars would crowd the entertainment districts. Courtesans from all the top Qinglo would arrive in their finest silks, competing for attention while musicians played, and assembled men would drink, debate, and compose poetry on the spot to praise their favorites. It was a vibrant and high-stakes beauty pageant. Created by groups of scholars and wealthy patrons, the courtesan ranking list judged contestants across 4 main categories: talent, beauty, charm, and character quality. A courtesan had to excel in all of these areas in order to reach the top of the rankings. To be named at the top of a courtesan ranking list was like having a #1 hit song. It would make a courtesan famous overnight and cause her value to skyrocket. This ranking system was loosely modeled after the ranking list of imperial exam results, and the winner would be crowned the Huakui of the list, and fame came from more ways than just placement on a list. A popular courtesan's literary work, art, and music were all widely circulated. They also made public performances that could be seen as a public concert today. These performances were often held on huafang, or elaborate multi-storied pleasure boats. But why a boat? The Qinghuai River itself was the perfect natural stage, and a busy public waterway. Unlike a private house or a small theater, a performance on a huafang could be seen by thousands of people at once. It was the ultimate grand show. This allowed even the general public who couldn't afford to enter a Qinglo to see these celebrity figures. All of this contributed to a broader fan base and the confirmation of their celebrity status. But this system of celebrity created a tragic paradox. Even as these women were being exploited, the most famous among them could achieve a kind of public influence and personal freedom that was unthinkable for other women. A respectable wife in the Ming Dynasty was confined to the inner quarters of her home, her life dictated by her husband and in-laws. A celebrity courtesan, however, could engage with the most powerful men of her generation, including top scholars, artists, and officials, as their intellectual peer. Her poetry could be published, her paintings sought by collectors, and in some cases, she could even own property. She was both a commodity and a culture icon, a person of low status who wielded a surprising amount of power. For all their influence, these celebrity courtesans were like beautiful kites, flying high on the cultural wind of the late Ming Dynasty. And when the dynasty collapsed, these winds stopped, and they were destined to fall. The new Manchu emperors of the Qing dynasty brought with them a period of paranoia and strict censorship. They launched the Literary Inquisition, a campaign of intellectual terror. Every piece of writing by scholars were intensely examined for hidden criticisms or disloyalty to the new Qing rulers. A single line of unacceptable poetry could be seen as treason, which could get an author and his entire family executed. So what happens to a business when its main selling point of intellectual art becomes too dangerous? The business has to change. The witty debates and risky poetry vanished, and the art of Qinglo was no more. Celebrity courtesans were no longer celebrated as poets and artists. Instead, they became measured only by their beauty and entertainment skills. The golden age of the Qinglo had come to an end. The Qinglo of the Ming Dynasty was a world of profound contradictions. It was a stage for some of the most brilliant art and literature, built on a foundation of cruelty and exploitation. It was a place where men sought an escape from the duties of the family, and where courtesans sold the illusion of love while dreaming of an escape for themselves. What do you think of this complex world? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed today's video, please don't forget to like and subscribe. If you want to support this channel and help me uncover more fascinating stories from Chinese history, please check out my membership and become a Noble Baobab. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.
Stay curious, stay magical.